In our world, most things are not just black and white, and that obviously also goes for websites. That's why CSS enables us to change the color of the elements on our site. It allows us to use a variety of different color formats in order to do so. We have covered what color formats are and which ones exist in the last video, so if you don't know that yet, I recommend watching that video first before continuing here. With that out of the way, let's learn how to use CSS and color formats to make our sites colorful. In order to do that, I've prepared an example document with 6 headings defined by the elements h1 to h6. In the browser, this currently looks quite boring. All of the headings are black. In order to be able to change that, a style.css file is linked to our site that we can now write our CSS in. Let's start with the biggest heading, which is the h1 element, and therefore write h1 as selector. Inside the curly braces, we now want to change the color of the text. This is what the color property is for. Now we need to choose a color for the heading, and it would be great if we had a list of all the colors we can choose from. To get that, we could of course Google for CSS colors or something like that, but Visual Studio Code can give us that information much faster, without even having to leave the application. Right after the colon, we can simply hold the Ctrl key and hit space. A small menu is opened that contains suggestions for what we could write next. Since we are about to set a color, all predefined colors CSS offers are listed here. If we scroll a bit, we can see that there are not only simple colors like blue or brown, but also some crazier names like lawn green for very specific colors. So let's choose a color that we like navy for example. Save the document and have a look at the result in the browser. Here we can see that it has worked, and that the biggest heading is indeed now displayed in the dark blue that is called navy in CSS. In total, there are 140 such colors that have gotten a name and are supported by all browsers. But even though this may sound like a huge amount, 140 colors are actually very few considering that there are currently 2 billion websites and 2.5 million new ones are added every single day. If all of those websites only use the same 140 colors, the internet would look really boring, and there would be almost no way to separate your site from all the others. That's why the predefined colors are barely ever used in professional environments. Instead, CSS gives us the ability to define very specific colors in different formats that are also used by painting and image manipulation applications like Photoshop. The RGB function allows us to define colors as RGB values, which are mixtures of red, green and blue. In order to do so, you type RGB and then inside brackets the 3 values for the color channels are set. That always happens in the same order. The red value is first, followed by the green channel and then the blue value. Let's try that for the H2 heading. In order to do so, we first need to use the H2 selector in our CSS file to select all H2 elements, and then write color for the property inside the curly braces. For the property value, we don't write a color name this time, but the 3 letters RGB and then the values for the 3 channels surrounded by brackets. Let's set 255 for red, 0 for green and 255 for blue, which should give us magenta. We can see that in this little box that Visual Studio Code displays for us. Of course, we can also save the CSS file and refresh the site in the browser to see that the H2 heading is now displayed as magenta. The RGB format can be extended by the RGBA format. It works just like the RGB format, in that it also has 3 values for red, green and blue channels. But in addition, RGBA also uses another channel to define the so-called alpha value. This alpha channel sets the opacity for the color and can therefore be used to make it transparent. Unlike the other values, the alpha is not a number from 0 to 255, but a percentage or a decimal number from 0 to 1 instead. 0 equals fully transparent, meaning that the color will not be visible at all, and the value of 1 gives a fully opaque color. Let's try that using the 3rd heading. We need another entry in our CSS file and have to use H3 as selector. For the property name, we will again use color and set RGBA as value. To keep it comparable, we will again write 255, 0 and 255 for the color channels to again get magenta as color. Now only the alpha value is missing. Let's set 0.25 for that in order to get 25% opacity. If we now refresh the site in the browser, we can see that the 3rd heading is much more transparent than the 2nd one and therefore appears brighter since the background is white. The next way to define colors is the hexadecimal format, and it works just like RGB. It also has 3 values that the color is made up of, and the values are again for the intensity of red, green and blue. The difference is that the intensity for each channel is not defined by a decimal number from 0 to 255, but by 2 hexadecimal characters from 00 to FF. The 6 characters that a color consists of in this format are then stuck together and are prefixed by a number sign to mark them as a hexadecimal color. Let's try that with the 4th heading. Since it is an H4 element, we need to create a new entry in the CSS file and select all H4 elements. The property we want to change is again color. We just want to set a hexadecimal value this time. So let's enter a number sign to mark the hexadecimal format and set a value, like 00FF00 for example. This should result in green, since the first 2 characters, which are the red channel, and the last 2 characters, which are the blue channel, both have a value of 0, and the middle 2 characters for the green channel have maximum intensity. We can also see that in the browser, where the 4th heading jumps right at us with its powerful green. Such hexadecimal color values where the 2 characters for each channel are the same, like we have 00, FF and 00, are very common. That's why there's a shorthand way to write those, that only consists of 3 characters. Therefore, we could just write 0F0, and the browser then knows that each of the characters should be interpreted like there were 2 of them. Next, we can also define colors in the HSL format. Here, colors are defined by 3 values for hue, saturation and lightness. To define such colors, the letters HSL are written followed by brackets that contain the 3 values. The order of these values is the same as in the format's name. We start with hue, followed by saturation and have lightness as last. Let's use that for our 5th heading. It is an H5 element, and therefore we need a new entry for all H5 elements. This time we write HSL as value for the color property and then open the brackets. The hue value defines an angle in the color wheel and can therefore have a value from 0 to 360. 0 is red, 120 is green and 240 is blue. In between them, the mixed colors can be found. Let's choose 180 for the hue, which should be cyan. The second value is saturation and is set as a percentage. 0% is a shade of gray and 100% is the color's fullest intensity. Let's set 75% here. Now only the brightness remains, and it is again set as a percentage. Here, 0% means black, 50% is neither bright nor dark, and 100% is white. Let's choose the middle way here and set 50%. If we now save that and return to the browser, we can see that it has worked, and the heading is now displayed in cyan. Now only the last heading remains, since just like with RGB, the HSL format also offers an option to set an alpha value, and it again defines the opacity as percentage or decimal from 0 to 1. So let's create a new CSS entry for H6 elements and set HSLA with the values 180, 75%, 50% and 25% for the color property. This should give us cyan with 25% opacity. If we now switch back to the browser, we will see that the last heading is barely visible anymore, since it is now very transparent. Last but not least, there's another method for defining colors in CSS, and it always gives us the current text color of the element. This can be achieved using the currentColor keyword. This may not sound very useful at first, but it can be really handy if we want to add a border with the same color as the text, for example. So let's add a border property to the CSS entry for H1 elements. This border property can take 3 things as value: the size, kind and color of the border. Let's write 5px for the size to make it 5 pixels wide. For the kind of border, we will go with solid to get a straight line, and for the color, we will use the currentColor keyword. If we now save and return to the browser, we can see that the H1 heading has gotten a border, and it has exactly the same color as the text. We now know all the ways to define colors in CSS. Of course, we can do much more than changing the text color in CSS. We will discuss all of the options we have and how they can be used in future videos. So subscribe to the channel to not miss out on that.